Welcome to the Murder Media podcast, where we analyse and overthink true crime media. I am your host, Dr. Stella Marie Gaynor, and you can follow the project over on Instagram at murdermedia81 and on Facebook, and you can email directly at murdermedia81, that's the numbers 81, at gmail.com. I hope everyone's doing alright. I'm alright actually. I've been on a little holiday. So last week I went away for pretty much a full week. We started with 2 days in Sheffield, seeing that bunch of mates. There was a gig, our mate's band called Poke. Yes, you heard me correctly, they're called Poke. They're really good fun. The gig was fun. And here's the first complaint about heat on the holiday. It was really, really hot. It was really muggy. The band members was hot. All the people that were there were hot. The bar staff was hot. It was just hot. I put some makeup on the band members, which was fun. Have I said on here that I used to be a makeup artist? Did I say that, last year? Anyway, whatever. I used to be, and I put some makeup on my friends who were in Poke, and that was nice. It's nice to do it sometimes again. After Sheffield, we went to Ripon. It's in North Yorkshire. It's really pretty. Ripon is a city, it says the city of Ripon. It's really small. It's got a cathedral. I think that's why it's a city. A market town, I guess. We saw some really old shit. There's the Devil's Arrows, which are these really old, I can't tell you how old. I did read it on the sign, but I've forgotten. These really old standing stones, which look like arrowheads, as the name suggests. We went to a couple of henges, you know, the ones that are like the big mounds in the ground, like big circles. For want of a better word, because they are circular. Is that a word? Circular. It is now. And they were really old as well. I can't remember how old. Anyway, that's enough for our time team section this week. But more in keeping with this podcast, we went to the Police History and Crime Museum in Ripon. It was alright. I enjoyed it, but I think I confused it with another museum, perhaps the Mental Health Museum, which might be near Bradford. And again, I might be making that up, but there is a mental health museum. Because I thought that the Ripon one had some more stuff about execution in there, and maybe that's in the other museum. What the Ripon Museum did have is some really tiny, oppressive, haunting, really depressing prison cells, all set up as they would have been in years past, with like the bed made out of wood, and the pillow is also made out of wood, and the window is tiny and really high up, and yeah, it was really, really grim. But what was most interesting to me, and maybe to you as well, was that they had some copies of the old police gazettes. If you cast your minds back to episode 1, season 1 of the Murder Media podcast, remember I did a super quick history of true crime. I talked about execution sermons, then the police gazette, and then the more lurid True Detective Mysteries magazines. Well, the Police Museum in Ripon had some of the police gazettes, and they made for some really mad reading. I did take a photograph of one, and I put it on the Instagram. And then we went to Fountains Abbey, and again, really fucking old. Or some of it is, so like it's got bits that are older, and then there's bits that's been added to it over the centuries, really. It's really, really spectacular. If you're in the area, please do go and see it. And in it being spectacular, I tried to be all cool and take a sketchbook and fancy pencils with me to sit and draw the Abbey, mainly because it's also a thing that my teenager likes to do, because they can actually draw. They're actually an artist and I'm really not. But we sat and we sketched, and I don't know how, but for quite a long time my sketch of this old Abbey looked like the World Trade Centre. I had to get looking at it and being like, what's that reminding me of? And then finally we stopped at a mate's farm and I fed some goats and lambs, and yeah, the goats were the highlight of the holiday. Yes, a week spent seeing some good mates at the start, and then days spent with just my husband and my teenager, but my favourite thing was the goats. But now I'm back, and I've been writing lectures so far this week. That shouldn't be plural, actually. I've written one lecture so far this week. It takes a while to do a lecture. It's for that new crime and horror module. I should also update the book process. So I got 2 reports back from the 2 readers, both positive, and both, as is normal and is expected, suggested some changes and additions. So I've written my response to that, and now the editor takes it all to the board, and then I wait to see if it's properly a go. And it does take long for this to happen, which is absolutely not a complaint. Like, it's great that time and effort and attention is paid to everyone's work, but I guess it's just the waiting and the wondering, what if I've got this far and it gets knocked back? I'd have to start again with another publisher, so fingers crossed, everyone, that it comes back okay. Right, shall we talk about some blood? Quick aside, I've got the window open, it's very, very warm, I can't close it. About 6 weeks ago, my colleague and I hosted the Blood, Myth and Media Symposium at the university. I've mentioned it a couple of times. We were given some funding to do an event, with the point being that it should benefit our research. Now, because we were doing it together, we had to find something that overlapped. Now, my colleague does loads of ace work in menstruation studies, and I, of course, do horror and true crime, so the overlap is blood. So we decided to have a day exploring blood. the myths, the mysteries and the representation of blood in media. So we put out a call for papers, speakers were invited, and I think, like I said back in the Ted Bundy Ghost episode, it went really well. There was loads of interesting papers, and this episode is my paper adapted and extended so I can tell you lot all about it. True crime, of course, tends to feature quite a lot of blood, even crime that's not true crime. So think about gangster films, think about forensic dramas like CSI and the like. But what Stella explored in her excellent article on the true crime documentary genre around the close-ups on crime scenes, she talked about the fetishization of the crime scene and all of its details, the evidence verite, there's that pronunciation again, and what we frequently see in these close-ups is a lot of blood. What we, the audience, the viewer, are invited to do is read the blood. So what story is the blood telling us? Of course, some crime scenes are bloodier than others. Depends what was done, I suppose, and how shit went down. But when it came to putting my paper together for the Blood, Myth and Media event, 2 cases with their media texts immediately sprung to mind. The death of Kathleen Peterson, as explored in The Staircase, so the documentary or the drama, both with the same title, and the Night Stalker, the Richard Ramirez case, with so many murders and so many bloody crime scenes all committed by that one bastard. In true crime media, blood is not just a forensic clue, but also a powerful narrative and symbolic device. Blood is the boundary, the marker between fact and spectacle, between the victim and the perpetrator, between the truth and myth, or, as in the Peterson case, between the truth and what being filthy rich can do to get a person out of prison. In true crime media, and for this episode I'm focusing on visual media, screen media, blood can come to represent the victim's body, particularly if the body's no longer there, if it's been moved by the criminal, or if it's been moved by the authorities. Blood implies the presence of a body, and blood implies the details of a crime. True crime TV shows and documentaries tend to dramatise blood. Think about all those slow pans and creep-ins on the crime scene photographs, like as Stella noted, like I've just said, or in the reenactments. In fact, quick aside here, when I was thinking about my paper for the Blood, Myth, Media Symposium, I also thought about covering Spike Lee's 1999 film Summer of Sam, which is a lot based on the David Berkowitz case in New York. And those murder scenes in that film are genuinely horrific. So there's blood everywhere when the shooting is happening. And it's because the shooting's happening at close range and in lots of cases in the enclosed spaces of the cars. But I decided I wanted cases where the media text, so the documentary and the dramas, placed the blood at the very front of the narrative being developed to try and solve these crimes. So the blood is telling the story in the cases that I did look at. In the Summer of Sam, David Berkowitz case, the blood is not necessarily something that pushes the narrative forward because it's quite obvious what's happened and how it's happened. Don't know why I laughed then, it's not funny. So if you've not seen Summer of Sam, then see it. It's Spike Lee, so it's obviously brilliant. Right, where was I? Honestly, where was I? Stuff, blood, right, yeah. True crime series and documentaries and media, all slowly creeping in and panning across bloody crime scenes. Blood becomes crucial to the narrative of a crime. Blood evidence is left there for the detectives and forensic teams to read what the crime scene is telling them. The discovery of blood often starts the story. Blood is the catalyst for the tale that unfolds. And just as blood can start a story, it's also often the resolution. A DNA match, for example, can prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. And of course, blood has shock value. Blood sells and sensationalises stories. Audiences are fascinated by the gory details. True crime media, murder media, frequently shifts between the gory details and the bloody crime scenes and then moves to emotional storytelling. So we get something harrowing and disturbing and something that might make us angry, and then in the next sequence we'll have something that's more emotional and tragic and tugging on the heartstrings. So the blood then is a bridge between the two. Murder media has lots of repetition. The same crime scene photo or footage will be repeated often multiple times in the same media text. This repetition is one of the defining features of contemporary true crime, which is something that the Murder Media Project is examining more broadly. So we're looking at the constant repeating of the same killers, the same cases across media, but we can also observe repetition inside single media, true crime media, murder media texts. It's a long sentence. If we look at the repeating scenes, the repeating crime scene footage, the repeating crime scene photos, the repeated B-roll, the repeated stock footage. Now, if you were to ask my husband about this repetition, particularly on Netflix, he gets really pissed off about it. So if you ever want to wind him up, there's some ammunition. He can easily be found yelling at Netflix when they're telling the same details again and again. Or when I'm watching something and they're telling the same details again and again. He won't even be watching it. He'll be sat on the other side of the room and he'll shout, "You've already told me!" So with that pointless information, let's start with the first case study. The docuseries on Netflix, Night Stalker, The Hunt for a Serial Killer. So let's start then with Satan's best friend, Richard Ramirez, aka Night Stalker.
Hot summer streets and the pavements are burning, I said.
In the 1980s, we were proud of the city.
LA was glamorous, but if you went around to the other side, LA could be a very dark place.
I was on the freeway, and here comes somebody speeding, and all of a sudden he just swerves around my car. It's like he's right there, like a moment stop. And he has this horrible big grin, and he's missing all these teeth. He just stared at me like a killer clown.
We got us a serial killer.
There was no doubt about it. This was a pretty sick individual.
The so-called Night Stalker who has terrorized California.
The same man is suspected in 6 to 8 murders and 25 to 30 attacks.
He's someone that will go into a home at night and will kill.
I woke up to a very loud noise, to which I responded, "John," and immediately I knew it wasn't John, but something was there.
There was no pattern.
Anyone could be a victim. He went after old people, young people, men, women.
It's unheard of.
We've never encountered anybody like that in criminal history.
Everybody was talking about it.
I'm scared. I think everybody else is scared.
It's a cruel,
Pressure was on
cruel summer.
to stop the madman that was doing all this.
So we start trying to piece all this puzzle together.
We were in for a roller coaster ride.
It's the only time in my entire life that I slept with a gun.
There's pentagrams on walls.
It just keeps getting creepier.
He waited until he saw the fear in her eyes, then he shot her.
What causes a person to do what he does?
I said, "I won't scream. I swear upon God." And he said, "Swear upon Satan."
You could sense it. There's evil in that man.
It's a cruel, cruel summer.
Richard Ramirez, between April 1984 and summer 1985, killed at least 14 people. He would break into people's houses in the greater Los Angeles area and in the San Francisco Bay Area and commit sexual assaults and brutal murders with knives, hammers, wire cords and firearms. Ramirez was eventually caught when 2 women in a grocery store recognised him from the newspapers. So when they'd eventually, put his mugshot on the newspapers, or not his mugshot, the sketch, the police sketch. People gave chase. He tried to steal a car, but he was pulled out by a bunch of people who kicked the ever-living fuck out of him. So well done. He was sent to prison, sentenced to death, and he died in 2013 whilst awaiting execution. In 2021, Netflix releases Night Stalker: The Hunt for a Serial Killer, a 4-part docuseries which tells the story from the point of view of the detectives on the hunt for Ramirez. Now I'm going to focus on the first episode of Night Stalker, called Devil in the City of Angels, and we're going to keep thinking about repetition. In episode 1, we're introduced to the main players of the story, Detective Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno. But for this episode, I'm concentrating mainly on Gil. I'm going to describe the opening few minutes of the episode, where we're introduced to Los Angeles, the murders, and eventually to the copious amounts of blood used to tell the story. As the episode starts, existing actuality footage of LA during the 80s is remixed and repurposed to present us with this facade of a 1980s Los Angeles, a place that was supposed to be about fun and prosperity. So let's start at the beginning then. It first starts with a young Gil Carrillo speaking to camera in an official video from the Los Angeles Homicide Squad, requesting the public's help in finding the killer responsible for so many brutal attacks. The clip features VHS distortion, the sound is lo-fi, the camera creeps in on Gil, exposing the scan lines on the tape as he explains some of the details of the crimes. Quote, "The suspect has used guns, knives, tire irons, handcuffs, thumb cuffs," end quote. Gil's words here fade into an echo, and the tracking issues so commonly associated with VHS distortion takes us to another voiceover telling us how, quote, "LA has almost all benefits and no negatives," end quote, over clips of the opening ceremony of the 1984 Olympic Games, which are held in LA, palm trees, aerobics, driving with the top down, people roller skating along Santa Monica, Bruce Springsteen's Glory Days plays over the top, there's beaches, people working out, and the talking heads which are going to feature in the rest of this docuseries, they're explaining how their 80s Los Angeles was kind of seen to be a great decade. The Queen came to visit, they say, the Pope, we had the Olympics, crime was down, the freeways were relatively clear, hot summers, and then, the line which cuts through all of this, quote, This amazing city, so many parallel universes, end quote. So at this point in the montage, we're still in the first 3 minutes. At this point, we see some Hollywood stars, then the inside of a shoddy apartment that's clearly been used for taking drugs, more glamour, and then grass fires. And then where I really like how this opening montage slips into the dark side of LA, the clips kind of get remixed and they get flipped around 180 degrees, or the playing of the footage sort of goes backwards and forwards. Even the musical score from the boss, Bruce Springsteen, is sort of played backwards and forwards, like a little like a record being pushed and pulled forwards and back before we see an upside down LA. So it's drone footage over the city at night, but it's been flipped upside down. These shots of the city are stretched and pulled, tipped and distorted. And it's a really simple device really, but it works brilliantly. So you might even draw, and I think you should, we will draw an intertextual resonance here to the upside down in Stranger Things, and with the discussion we had in season 1 about nostalgia and the Ted Bundy tapes, even the logo of this Night Stalker series is heaving with nostalgia. It's hot pink, graffiti style font, and at a glance it looks like an 80s sitcom, or what it puts me in mind of immediately is the Fear Street horror slasher series. So the montage continues. The footage of various bodies being taken out of houses in body bags in this remixed montage. This news footage of all these bodies is out of order. We don't know which victims these are, from which serial killer, but if you're in any way familiar with the serial killer media from the 80s, you'll have seen some of these images before. The footage has been repurposed to draw a general picture of a violent, dark, brooding Los Angeles that sort of sits behind or alongside or in parallel to this decade that was supposed to be opulent and exciting. At the end of this montage, we even get a quote from Mr. Satan himself, blathering on about how everyone, what does he say? Something like, everyone's a little evil, are we not? It's like, oh God, shut up. But his words are given to us as text on screen in that same hot pink colour. At the very end of the montage, there is, in newly created footage, a slow motion of a blood drop dripping onto a floor. Then a hammer falls, dripping in blood at the business end of the hammer, also drops to the floor, bounces and leaves further blood spatter. It's all very cinematic, of course, but if we think, what does slow motion do? It generates a strong emotional impact. It makes an action more impressive, intensifies emotion, creates a sense of drama. This recreated bloody murder weapon then, and we learn later that Ramirez did use a hammer on occasion, is the bridge between the disintegration of the sunny and dynamic Los Angeles and the roaming serial killer story that we're about to hear unfold. And it's the lens now with which we view this case. So the blood here links the chaos of the city and the brutality of the killer with our main character of the story, Detective Gil Carrillo. Let's keep thinking about this notion of repetition. We can use this to understand the flow of the narrative of Night Stalker, the beats and the moments that are presented to us again and again, but always written in blood. The first case is the murder that happens at Rosemead, which is a small area of Los Angeles. There's a slow creep in on a crime scene, the evidence of which is blood. Blood spatter on the carpet, blood up a door. So we're creeping in on these crime scene photographs. The blood here is the catalyst for this part of the story. It's the first thing that we and the detectives see as they arrive at the crime scene. The blood represents the killer's presence, the killer's actions, long after he has left. Gil Carrillo describes what happens. A woman was shot after dropping her car in her garage, so she's driven home, dropped her car in the garage. The intruder, Ramirez, gets her attention and shoots her. Now she holds up her hand, which have her car keys in them, and the bullet bounces off the keys and it saves her life and she runs away. She hears a second shot. She goes back to the house and encounters Ramirez again. She says, "You already shot me once. You don't need to again." And he just leaves. He just walks off. Mad, right? Anyway, so her journey here, dropping the car off, the shot, the keys, the running, the returning, is mapped out in the blood spatter. As Gil explains this, he recalls her witness statement, and the accompanying visual is panning up, panning down and across photos of the blood spatter. So I think she was injured somehow with that shot, but it didn't kill her. Now these photos we've already seen as we arrived, quote unquote, arrived at the crime scene as the cops arrived at the house. But now this episode shows us these pictures again. It repeats them, but this time in the order that puts together the woman's testimony, puts together her story as Gil tells it. So through Gil's words, we read the blood spatter. The spatter illustrates her words. The blood is crucial to the unfolding narrative of the Night Stalker, as it provides an illustration of the actions taken by this woman on a night 40 years ago. This first episode features lots of bloody scenes. There's lots of bloody scenes throughout this series. It was fucking gross. And if I went through them, I'd be here all day. So I'll just sort of run through two that I think are particularly important in this first episode. So in this first crime scene at Rosemead, the blood is full visual spectacle. It's full on gore. The production team of this particular docuseries have blurred out the victim's head. So that second shot that our first woman heard was Ramirez shooting her housemate and shooting her dead. And she was murdered in the kitchen. So the production team, they've blurred out that victim's head and face in the crime scene photographs that this episode kind of swoops and pores over. So I guess sometimes the injury inflicted on the person, if it's the head and the face, might be deemed too gory to show. So I do know something like she was hiding from him in the kitchen. Ramirez was sort of creeping around looking for her, and he went quiet, and she sort of popped her head up over the kitchen counter, and that's when he shot her in the head. So that's a brutal injury. But sometimes these victims died by other means at the hands of Ramirez, stabbing, strangling, or whatever. So their heads and faces were left kind of intact, as it were. And when you do see those crime scene photographs throughout the show, we do see more identifying features, I guess, of these victims. Perhaps the blurring is one small, tiny nod to affording this victim a degree of dignity, even privacy, in this moment which has rendered them otherwise public property. But inside this apartment, the pools of blood, the spatters, the splashes, the bright red against white sheets and white walls is enough to carry the symbolic weight that it needs to demonstrate this highly violent crime. The trauma, the sadness, and the enormity of the task to find who did this. That Ramirez killed so many bloody crime scenes on display in this series, it allows us to learn the crime and to learn his modus operandi. And of course, very famous to the Ramirez case, we learn his preferred style of tennis shoe. Towards the end of the episode, there's a kind of breakthrough, like a little sniff of a breakthrough, a little clue. So they'd already found the print of his shoe in a garden of one set of people who he didn't kill. So in the soil beneath the window of a house he attempted to break in. Or did he get in? I can't remember. Maybe he did and he was disturbed. Either way, he didn't kill them. Maybe he just robbed them. Podcasting gold, loads of detail here. He may have gone in, he may have not, but he left a shoe print. And the couple of that house, they find the shoe print, and it's beneath their window where he either got in or he didn't. But where they've got plants and stuff in the soil, there's a print of a tennis shoe. Now at this stage, a few things have happened. We've had some murders, we've had some breaking and entering, we've had some sexual assaults, and Gil Calero, sorry Gil, saying your name wrong because he's obviously listening, he's already convinced at this point that it's the work of one person. It's the work of a serial killer, serial attacker, serial offender. And of course, his bosses are not. But at the crime scene towards the end of episode 1, we get the same shoe print, but this time it's printed in blood. The crimes of Ramirez are particularly unsettling, I think, because he broke into people's houses, isn't it? Like, you're not even safe at home. But this print in blood is just so eerie. But for our purposes, and thinking here about the use of blood to piece together a story, how the images of blood are repeated and recreated, I think it's really interesting. So the first image at this location, there's been a murder. It's a crime scene photo that we see, and the shoe print is on a bed sheet, and the shoe print is kind of like a bed sheet is ruffled, right? So it's been pulled a little bit taut so that a ruler can be placed next to the shoe print so that we can see how big it is. Then we get another crime scene photograph. It's the same shoe print in blood on the same sheet, but this time the sheet is pulled almost completely flat, pulled even tighter for kind of a better, clearer look at this shoe print. Then the bloody shoe print is recreated in CGI. It's animated. So we're seeing it for a third time, but this time it's remixed and remade in an animation of the camera panning over the bed and tipping forward to run up along the print. In this animation, the blood is also a brighter red. Now, blood, when it first bleeds, is quite bright. I'm sure you know, you've all bled. And as it dries, it darkens. In the actual crime scene pictures of the shoe print that we see first, that bloody print has that kind of brownish hue to it. In rendering the bloody print in a brighter blood, in a brighter red, it appears fresher. This recreation takes us back in time to when the print was first made. Via processes of animation, recreation and repetition, this image of the bloody shoe print has been transported from a piece of evidence that is at the very least hours old to a 3D image of a fresh mark left possibly just moments ago by a callous killer. Repeating the image pushes just how important this piece of evidence was. And if you've seen any other true crime documentary on Netflix, they love recreating objects and crime scenes and rendering them in 3 dimensions with either complex recreations like this or the layering of photographs and creating depth with a parallax. Basically, this sort of like diving in and whooshing around a disturbing crime scene is endemic in the Netflix murder media newsstand, and it's one of the defining features of the Netflix gloss and the Netflix house style, something which I'm going into a lot of detail in the Murder Media book. Alright, The Staircase, a 2022 HBO dramatisation of the Peterson case. Kathleen Peterson died on the 9th of December 2001. In 2003, Michael Peterson, her husband, was convicted of her murder. There's a documentary of the same name, The Staircase, about the same case, by a group of French filmmakers. We won't really be talking about that today, but I'm going to have to mention it a couple of times. But unless I say otherwise, when I say The Staircase, I mean the HBO dramatisation of the case. Michael Peterson later took the Alford plea on his reduced charge of voluntary manslaughter. Kathleen Peterson died at the bottom of a set of stairs in the Peterson house, and there was left lots and lots of blood. The blood is poured on the steps and smeared and coughed and splashed up the walls. So much of this case is hinged on these blood patterns. The blood pattern is key to all 3 narratives which explain Kathleen's death. I'm sure you know them all by now, and I'm sure I've said them on this podcast before, but just in case, there's 3 theories. 1, Kathleen might have died because she fell on the stairs and hit her head. 2, she might have died when Michael Peterson murdered her on the stairs. And 3, Kathleen was attacked by an owl outside of the property, which led her to run inside, bleeding profusely, and she fell on the stairs, again injuring her head. I want to look at 2 of these death sequences in the staircase, and on the actual staircase, the fall and the murder. Let's hear the trailer.
I'd like to make a toast to so many better days ahead. Every day is going to be an adventure. So always stop and think, this is one of the happiest days of my life.
To the Petersons. To us.
911, where's your emergency?
My wife, she had an accident.
What kind of accident?
She fell down the stairs.
Is she conscious?
No, she's not breathing.
There were 35 cuts and bruises and 7 deep lacerations to the scalp.
Someone holding something caused the impact to make these wounds. Make any adjustments you see fit.
It's a witch hunt.
We need to get you a lawyer. In a case like this,
Keep your family close. You'll need them on your side.
we have no murder weapon, but we found countless images on his computer.
Dad tells stories. He kept that from all of us, not from Mom. She would have told me.
You're beautiful, and you're my daughter.
I got a call from a couple documentarians. They want to make a movie about our case.
The French do have good taste.
The fact of the matter is, she had some wine and fell.
You just wander through life, going to the gym and yelling at the dogs and spending my money. You took the life of the best thing you ever had.
I haven't even told you half of what we know about Germany.
It was 25 years ago and nothing happened. You know, there wasn't even any blood.
Well, there was some blood, Michael.
My ex-wife, everyone. She'll be around all week.
Dad has been there for us always. Stop questioning everything. Just stop.
I can't. Do you really think that Kathleen Peterson really knew who her husband was?
I think there are not many families like us.
I'm tired all the time. I need help.
We're not perfect, but we stick together.
They called me a liar.
Maybe we both are.
And we love each other.
The Petersons are crazy.
Just to think about adaptation for a moment, we can see the transportation of the story from documentary to dramatisation. This already mediated case in the documentary is remediated, remade in this process here in this HBO drama. In doing so, the staircase drama gives us more points of view. The documentary filmmakers, for instance, we see their process. We see the developing romantic relationship between the editor of the documentary and Michael Peterson. For reasons unfathomable to me, she falls in love with him. But probably more interestingly is that it brings Kathleen Peterson back to life. Blood, however, is key to this tale. Blood is visual spectacle, and in this case it tells more than one story of how Kathleen died. There's repetition in the verbal descriptions of the two versions of the death story, the two versions given by the lawyers at trial. So the owl theory came much later on, so we don't need to keep thinking about that one. So when I'm talking about the versions of death, I'm talking about the fall and the murder. From the lawyers on both sides trying to piece together the story, one says fall, the defence, and the other, the prosecution, says murder. Each side visits the crime scene to look directly at the blood in situ and to read it to prove their side or their version of the story of the death. Each version of the death story told by the blood on the stairs, on the walls, is considered by the jury as they too visit the crime scene and even, as shown in the drama, gently reenact it themselves to sort of see like how could it happen this way. The murder version is further explained, repeated and tested by the prosecution's blood spatter analyst. And then the reenactment done by the cast members, Toni Collette and Colin Firth, who I must say, and I know I've said it before, both give incredible performances. Honestly, watch the series if you can. Alright, so to quickly sum up, we've got a death. We've got conflicting stories. We've got blood left at the scene being read by multiple people. It's being read by lawyers, jurors, analysts, and us, the viewers, to try and understand how Kathleen died. Two stories are being repeated. One bloody crime scene is being shown to us over and over again. Bloodstains and patterns at the bottom of the set of stairs represent what happened to Kathleen's body, either by accident or at the hands of Michael. I'll put images of it on the Instagram post. I'll try and get one from the drama series and one from the actual crime scene pics, but if you've seen the documentary, you've seen it again repeated many times. Anyway, the blood implies the violence and the tragedy as it offers dual narratives depending on how it is read. The blood at the bottom of the stairs is the bridge between the evidence and the stories constructed by the prosecution and the defence. Through the multiplicities of this case, so the doc, all the podcasts, the books, the list is huge, but through them we have learned this crime scene. We've understood how Kathleen could die in more than one way through the blood that is left. The reenactments in the staircase show us the possibilities of what the blood tells us. If the blood is a story, a hieroglyph rendered in blood that must be interpreted, the reenactments provide a performance of whatever script is there, written incomprehensibly in blood. The first version of Kathleen's death is the accidental fall, but before the episode gets to this, it's already been shown to us very vaguely by the defence team seeing the blood, visiting the crime scene and sort of gently acting out the fall themselves. So this all happens in episode 2. Kathleen then plays out what causes the blood patterns in the version we've been told earlier in this episode, and what we might know from the multiplicities of the case, the version that has Kathleen fall and hit her head. So she goes up the stairs, she trips and falls back, and she falls back hard. She bangs her head on the back wall. The camera then takes us to the hall. So the first image of that fall, the camera is up the stairs looking down on Kathleen. The next shot, we're out in the hall outside the set of stairs. She comes to after being temporarily knocked unconscious. Then we're back to the shot from up the stairs looking down at Kathleen. We see her cough towards a back wall, an action which the defence has already told us happened. We're back to the hall shot and we can see that spatter on the wall behind her, a spatter pattern that we've seen many times. Back on the stair shot, Kathleen tries to stand, she slips in the blood and she bangs her head a second time. She now coughs up the other wall, something we know, quote unquote, something we know, according to the narrative already told to us by the defence. We're back to the stair shot and we see Kathleen's final moments. There's a slow creep in and down the stairs. The blood on the walls is the central focus of this shot and Kathleen is slightly off to the left. This episode tells us this version verbally by the defence team and then it shows us in the performance from Toni Collette as Kathleen Peterson. The lawyers have read the blood, the defence lawyers have read the blood, and she plays out what this reading suggests. It is plausible though, it fits the blood patterns as they appear, and I should note that the patterns on the wall in this dramatisation match those from the actual crime scene very well. The attention to detail is really worth noting. So quick recap then. The episode shows the reading of the blood, before showing us Kathleen do it to fit one reading. This recreation does what the blood tells us in this version of events. The second possibility, the murder, comes in episode 4. Kathleen and Michael argue in the kitchen, viewed from a still shot in the hallway by the staircase. Now, by episode 4, we're quite used to the layout of the Peterson home. It feels like we're standing and watching them. It feels like we're just watching this argument, and because we know the layout, we know that we're sort of watching from next to the staircase. The editor, the director, could have decided to film that argument from anywhere in that kitchen, but it's filmed from just next to the staircase, which is really clever, but it's really eerie and really sad. Anyway, so there's a static shot. It's like we're just stood there, almost like spying on them, just watching them argue. The scene just lets Toni Collette and Colin Firth, just lets them act. It's brilliant. Once again, really do watch this series. As they argue, Michael walks away and Kathleen follows him. The camera now tracks them. So we're moving from still shot to this dynamic tracking shot. The sense is that the moment is erupting and it's now out of control. We're back in that stair shot with the camera up the staircase looking down. Michael goes up the stairs first and Kathleen follows. He pushes her back down. Then he grabs her and bangs her head on the step. Now we're in the hall shot outside the stairs. They fight. Back up to the stair shot, looking down, Michael bangs her head on the floor again, like the floor of one of the steps. Through these shots, the blood spatter is appearing on the walls and it's appearing on the steps in the configuration that we are used to because we've seen this bloody crime scene once Kathleen's body has been removed, because we've seen it so many times. Michael leaves her to get towels. He almost calls 911, but then he drops the phone. He goes back to her and she's convulsing. Again, all the movements of Kathleen and Michael create the blood patterns that we know were there. The story of the murder which was hidden in the blood patterns is revealed in this reenactment. Now, Michael could have murdered his wife in many ways at the bottom of these stairs, but the blood points to surely a finite number of possibilities of movements and actions on the part of Kathleen and Michael that would create such patterns. In conclusion, then, we can see in both Night Stalker and in the staircase the focus on the blood and the use of blood to tell a story. The blood creates a sense of drama for the visual spectacle of a Netflix documentary, but it also provides narrative beats that the media text can follow to tell such a story. Be it blood drops in a garage, bloody footprints on a sheet, or genuinely upsetting blood patterns at a set of stairs which in their complexity are able to tell more than one version of a horrible death. So that's the blood stuff. The symposium that we did had a more long-term goal of all the papers being pulled together for publication, either in an edited collection or a special issue of a journal, so that will happen at some point. We said we'd get on the case with that once we go back to being in the same office in September, and I'll keep you posted. One of the papers was actually about blood spatter analysis, so I'm sure you lot will like that chapter when it eventually becomes one. So where is the Murder Media podcast right now? As August rapidly approaches, I'm recording this on the 23rd of July, so it's August in a week? As August rapidly approaches, I had in my 8-month plan to bring season 2 to an end in August. So the next episode will more than likely be the last one for this highly erratic season. I'll have a think on what to end on. I'll have a look back over what I've watched and read in true crime this year, and I'll see what's been my favourite. Thank you as ever for listening and for sticking with me while 2025 has been so far completely insane. I was saying to Shelley, I reckon this time last year, how I was feeling like I wasn't doing enough in terms of conferences and public stuff, and well, I fucking changed that this year, didn't I? What with the Murder Media event and Dracula and Miskatonic and the Blood Day and work and this podcast and the book, and I need a happier, more balanced medium, which is something I hope to work on, I think, as we all do. So if there's anything you'd like me to cover in the next episode, message me on the Instagram page or comment on the post for this episode, and I will be back soon. Hope you're all having a lovely summer so far, and it's too hot in here, so goodbye.